we'll look at all of that, and then hopefully a big group of people will jump on board and try to find a way to get more people involved in our system.
Well, I hope so. I really do. I am becoming more and more distressed, and you and I have talked about this. I've talked about this with Thomas Wright, and he agreed. This last time around, in order to get a more representative group going out to the caucuses, look at the Herculean effort that it took. It took the parties putting all kinds of money and effort and so on into it to try to encourage people. I mean, there were advertisements that were being run, that were being funded to try to encourage people. We had cities who voted at a council level to clear the decks. West Valley City comes to mind, to clear the decks so people would and could go to their caucus meetings in this tiny, tiny, tiny little sliver of time that has outproportioned power beyond almost anyone's imagination. We even had a state legislator, Craig Powell, who wanted the state to pass a law that would clear the decks the nights of the caucus meeting to try to get people so they could and should and would go out to the caucus meeting. And it took the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and other religious organizations in unprecedented moves and statements to clear their decks for those 2 nights for people. Now, how often are we going to be able to do that, and what kind of a statement does that make? What kind of a statement does that make for that to happen? Holy smoke. I mean, that can't happen every single time.
No, and I'm sure some of these people would say you were, over-exaggerating, but you were drastically understating. It also was a presidential election year with a presidential candidate that Utah knew and loved, at least the Republicans, and so you keep adding on all that it took to get the numbers up. And you're still talking about a small slice that turned up after all of those efforts. And so, it just, 2014, obviously there's some concern. There's not really a great race that is appearing right now. Maybe Love Matheson, but you don't have a gubernatorial or Senate or certainly presidential. So I don't know how you would get anywhere close to those numbers again. And even that, even with that effort and with the representative, and it became a slightly more representative body, women, for example, were just as underrepresented for Republicans and Democrats as they were in 2008, which for Republicans was a 30% discrepancy between women voters and women being elected as delegates. That's 30%, 55 to 25%. And it's because the other fact that you said is it is the last election in the United States of America that is a deciding election that has only one place and one time where you can attend. And so, you can start listing all the people who, no matter how civically engaged they want to be, cannot attend. The single mother, the LDS missionary, the service member who's serving abroad, the business person who had to be away that week, the two-parent families that have to get to soccer games or otherwise. All of these people have no chance to participate. And that was, to me, the most single depressing vote. It didn't surprise me. Obviously, incumbents don't want to raise the threshold from 60 to 70.
Sure.
That makes it harder on them. But the Central Committee had voted with the two-thirds to make our caucus meetings more accessible, to use the technology that's developed since 1890 to allow more people to participate. And they even voted that down. And so that to me was kind of the real blow that they are just simply not even representative of their own Central Committee.
I know. It was really disappointing, and to put it in kind of blunt terms, I almost felt like I'd kind of been flipped off here. It really was disappointing on that particular aspect alone, even where the Central Committee went for it. Kirk, as always, I so appreciate your willingness to join us. It'll be most interesting to see what unfolds over the next little while. I wish you well, and let's look forward to chatting very, very soon. Over the weekend, the GOP convention held at the Southtown Expo Center, and members of the Grand Old Party convened from all four corners of the great state of Utah, and they elected a brand new party chairman. and that chairman is James Evans. And James, good to have you here. Thanks for joining us this morning on the Doug Wright Show.
Well, thanks for having me, Doug.
It's been a while since we chatted, and for many years, of course, we were chatting with you in various capacities, and not the least of which was the Salt Lake County GOP chairperson. Just your thoughts on taking the reins now and not just herding the cats from the Republican Party in Salt Lake County, but throughout the entire state.
Well, yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting challenge. I'm looking forward to it. This is kind of the time I like to get involved, is when we have some interesting challenges before us.
We do have some interesting challenges. Speaking as Republicans, it seems that there is a bit of a divide in the party when the Central Committee recommends a change in the caucus system, and then those who show up at the convention vote that down, and when 77% think it would be a good idea to raise the threshold a little bit, and the conventioners vote that down, it sounds like you do have some challenges coming up.
Well, yeah, but a lot of this has to do with basically how we go about making sure that everyone is on the same page, understanding what's the best interest of the party. So the way that I like to define the concern, and that is, and I say this to all the delegates, all registered Republicans, our party supporters, is that it's in our best interest to make sure we have as many Republicans participating in making a decision on who our nominees are. My desire is to make sure we can have extremely high caucus attendance. To me, that's the best way to make sure we have a more representative result. And in doing that, it's going to take a lot of effort ongoing to make sure that we have these extremely high caucus turnouts.
You know, I'm so pleased to hear you say that, because there are those of us that have, and sadly, we were labeled elitists by some of the people at the convention. I don't consider myself as a Republican elitist at all, nor do I see those who have a differing point of view occasionally as an elitist. But many of us do have real concerns about that very, very tiny slice of time, which should be about an hour and a half or 2 hours. Sometimes it goes a little longer, on one select night where there are no options, no do-overs, no second chance, no early opportunity, nothing. For the person who can't physically walk through the door, you're just left out in the cold. And some of us believe that somehow expanding that might be a good idea. Some of us also believe that there ought to be, back in the old days, and I'm not talking ancient history, you and I both remember this, when it was a 70% threshold at the convention, and then it was dropped to 60. Some of us think that a decent compromise would be around 66%. But boy, we got nothing, James, nothing at this convention. Not a bone, as I've said this morning, has been thrown.
And your assessment is correct. And I think a lot of that has to do with making sure we have the discussion in the way that everyone feels that we're focusing on the same goal. And that's my challenge, and this is what I want to put out there now. Because as all Republicans, do we want to make sure we have as many Republicans participating and the decision process on who our nominees are? If everyone supports that, if the answer to that question is yes, then that means we're all on the same page on trying to make sure that happens. Now, we can talk about exactly how to make that happen. There were a lot of concerns about if you increase the threshold, that means that you will ultimately have primaries only, which means that average participants who may want to run for office will always be disadvantaged. That was one of the concerns there. My focus more than anything else is that if we can't have consistently high turnout at the caucuses, ultimately the caucus system will be undermined. And that is what I would like everyone to at least focus on first.
Yeah. James, could I ask you, could you stay with us? We're going to invite Thomas to join us in our next segment. Could you hang on the line, too? I'd love to be able to chat with both of you for a few minutes.
Sure.
All right. James Evans with us here at KSL News Radio. He is the brand new head of the GOP in the state of Utah. Well, I'll tell you, not often do I see our email and our texts so incredibly lopsided. Well, I'm seeing stuff like this all over the place. I'm a precinct chair and was disappointed by the votes from the convention. It seemed like the masses were easily influenced by inflammatory and misleading dialogue. This person said, when are we going to stop letting the tip of the tail of the dog decide everything that happens in our capitalized state of Utah? This person said, Doug, I don't understand how the changes were not embraced. Could you find someone who could share their opinion or argument as for why they didn't accept the new proposals? This person said, I'm a fairly young voter. Went to my first caucus a few years ago. I was in shock. It seemed barbaric, disorganized, incredibly rushed because people didn't want to stick around for a longer period of time. This group said, so who's the real elitist? The 77% seeking change or the 23% preventing the change to protect their power? And this just goes on. And believe me, I read those in order. I did not skip one if it had a differing point of view on there. I think it underscores some of the challenges that our past chairman, Thomas Wright, who joins us on the line right now, and our current chairman in the GOP will have before him James Evans. And both of these gentlemen are on the line with me this morning here at KSL News Radio. We've already introduced everybody to James. So, Thomas, thank you for joining us as well. Good to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me on, Doug. And I just want to say congratulations to James. He's going to do a great job.
Yeah, as I mentioned, and Kirk Jowers also expressed admiration for and congratulations to James Evans, who is also on the line with us. Thomas, I know personally, not only from conversations on the air, but conversations off the air, how hard you have worked to expand what Ronald Reagan once called the big tent, or was referred to during his time as the big tent of the Republican Party, which could welcome so many different people and diverse people. I know how hard you worked to pay attention to the concerns of some of us now who have been labeled elitists, who are concerned about the concentration of power in the caucuses and also the threshold at which you can basically get a clean sweep at the Republican convention. You did an unprecedented outreach, but it ultimately came to naught. Your reaction about and from the convention?
Well, Doug, in my life and in my business, I just have been one of those people who's always tried to find common ground. I think, there were, two different opinions on the way forward for the Utah Republican Party, and I tried to build a bridge between those two and tried to help do what, Washington, D.C. hasn't been able to do and what seems like is a dying breed in politics, and that is try to find common ground, try to solve problems, and try to bring people together. And I'm really proud of that effort, and I'm really proud of the party for allowing that discussion to go on. And that's all we can do is continue to try to find common ground, and I'll never stop trying to do that.
I'll pin you down a little bit here, and you're not the chair anymore. Are you disappointed that some ground, not a bone, was thrown, not an inch was given to those of us, again, labeled as elitists, 77% of us who said, it might be a good idea to take that to 66 2/3. It might be a good idea to look for ways that we could be a little more inclusive in our caucus program. Are you at all disappointed?
Well, I'm trying to look on the bright side and say, I'm proud of the process that we went through. You have to try to build common ground. You have to try to find, what you have in common and try not to look at the differences. I've always wanted more participation during my time as chairman. That was why I ran. That's why I got involved, whether it was increasing vote by mail by 12 times or driving record attendance to the caucus meetings through a lot of fundraising and innovative ideas like putting signs up in the neighborhoods. I want more people involved in government. That's when we're going to get the best outcomes. And I thought that there were some opportunities to do that, and I supported some of those things, but ultimately they failed, and sometimes that happens. So we now we don't take our ball and go home. We try to look for the positives, and we try to figure out where we go from here to continue to make it possible for more people to participate, and I will continue to do that.
I'll ask this of both of you, and James, maybe I could get your response first. Do you believe that the effort to get a ballot initiative now will go forward basically full bore?